Hello, hello. I'm live streaming, but I'm also recording this for YouTube. So, if you're from the future YouTube folks, welcome, welcome. Um, anyways, I haven't been. If you have probably noticed, I haven't done a reaction in a minute. It's been a while, so I've just been kind of looking around and just haven't found anything that's really until I just randomly found this video. Um, I'm a little bit complicated when it comes to my politics. I mean, back in the day, especially when this was made, 2004, I would have been much more. I would have been Republican. I actually campaigned for Bush. I was like a teenager at the time too. I was like pretty young, or actually I was maybe like preteen even. I was super young. Was involved in politics from a very very young age. I just something about it always gravitated to me. Something about it always fascinated me, and so I'd even been from with political ideologies and whatnot. I've always been fascinated with it. Eventually, even got bachelor's in poli sci, political science, even despite essentially being like philosophically an anarchist. Essentially, that's kind of where I'm at with it. I do think we need a stateless society, but that's a whole other video for a whole other time. Right now, in terms of the practical here and now, think of it more of like libertarian-esque, essentially. I want, you know, the least amount of state possible. Although, if we are going to have a state, I do want to do things. So it is a little bit complicated. My beliefs, I'm like very left libertarian, I guess, right now. This, if you want to oversimplify it at the moment. But this video, I don't know, it just seemed appealing to me. 2004, especially, and I looked at this channel. It's very peculiar time in history. A lot of it is like history of your childhood was the what was kind of going about, which I found very interesting because that's yeah, that's what it is. He's like he's talking about my childhood type span. So, anyways, enough of me rambling. Let's get to it.
On the mountain, your uncle at the cookout, my taste in women. All in all, we all love a bit of Bush. And President George W. Bush is no exception. Okay, maybe he's an exception. The presidency of W may be one of the most historical and controversial of all time.
Look, I mean, I'll turn to say the man does have a certain like swagger to him. He does have like that. I don't know, like he's adorable because he's so like a bumbling. He has that bumbling sort of idiot sort of vibe. Even though I think a little bit of that is. I don't think he was much of an idiot as people think he is. I mean, I'll say this even like as someone who's much more left wing than he used to be now. And fair enough. What does a person like that think of AIPAC? Oh yeah, an AIPAC. See, that's the important distinction. You get it. That's a whole other thing. But yeah, I'm very anti-AIPAC. I don't like what they're doing. I think it's one thing to lobby, for, keep an alliance between two countries solid. But when you're just like outright, that's a whole other thing. Point being, like, yeah, I'm not a big fan of that. But yeah, with this, like with this situation, that's what he's saying. Yeah, like Bush, at the time, yeah, he has a swagger, and I still to this day. I mean, he has a nice personality compared to Trump. Let's face it. Like by comparison, I know a lot of people are like, "Oh man, I wish I had Trump." I mean, Bush now, because by comparison, Trump is such a
filled with the highest highs and the lowest lows. And most know that it almost never happened. But what you might not know is that his presidency was almost cut short. And I'm not talking about the time he almost choked to death on a pretzel, though that is very funny. No, I mean getting into another 50-50 election full of personal attacks, terrible ads, and controversy that again came down to just one state. A state that decided the fate of one of the most important presidencies in history and changed the course of America for decades. And also John Kerry was there. But first we have to start
not like obviously not like the whole war and all that, but that moment doing the speech like that, and he handled that chef's kiss perfectly. He handled that moment really well, which does kind of make you, if you're into the 9/11 conspiracy theories, I get it, because I mean, I don't think it was an inside job. I definitely think it was more like looking the other way, like, oh, what's that going on? Like, that I think is way more likely, than an outright, like, inside attack. That to me is way too conspiratorial. But there's definitely some sussy stuff going on in that time. There's definitely some very suspicious stuff. So I don't want to, completely. I'm not like conspiracy theories and that stuff, but like at the same time, I don't like dismissing all conspiracy theories. I think that's also very foolish.
Start of the end of my 2000 election video. Go watch that one too. George W. Bush was able to put Al Gore out the door in the previous election, and now it was time to get to work. He tried to make good on his promises, passing 2 of his tax cuts. He worked hard to get his education reform plan passed, negotiating for it, promoting it across the country by reading to children, and what's that? Oh, fuck. In the blink of an eye, Bush was a wartime president. The country rallied around him, and both parties thought he was doing a bang-up job responding to it. But like your parents, the love didn't last. He threw out the Cold War doctrine of containment and replaced it with preemptive strikes, so the U.S. would never be hit first again. And now in his crosshairs was his father's arch nemesis, Saddam Hussein. Bush began claiming that Iraq was not only funding...
It's like Doug Mead, I think it's his name. He's like a presidential historian. I actually got to meet him in real life, like years ago, like I was back in college, my college days, and he really went into detail about like this was a personal family beef between Saddam Hussein's family and the Bush family. People I don't think realize that, especially now. This was like an inter-family conflict more than just 2 countries going to war. This was like 2, political elite families going to war. There was lots of, Saddam had numerous times, threatened to, Bush Sr. and whatnot. So this was a lot of personal animosity. I think people don't realize this wasn't, this was, in terms of the politics, just very left field, out of nowhere. But in terms of the family, in terms of like personal dynamics, I think he just saw this as an opportunity. Like, I'm going to take out this dude too. I'm going to take out this guy too. It's not like he's a nice guy, he's a dictator. This wasn't like a democratic, this isn't going to be far. He saw it as probably far less controversial than that whole Iran, situation. Because, that was a duly elected, person that America had overthrown. In this case, this was just going to be a tyrant. This was a dictator. And so, there's that sort of, I was just kind of rambling about that. I just thought, just that I kind of connected that moment. But there's a lot of animosity
terrorists,
there.
but had WMDs for even worse attacks. So with the support of Congress and most Americans, he invaded. While popular at first, after declaring mission accomplished, the expensive war still had no end in sight. No WMDs were ever found, and deaths were rising. Back home, the economy was starting to get shaky as well. Unemployment was way up, and the deficit was higher than ever. While he still had high approval going into 2004, it was slipping fast, going from the 60s to the 40s in the first month alone. As election season approached, Bush thought of his pops. George H.W. Bush had also attacked Iraq and had huge support for it. Yet, he still lost his re-election. Bush Jr. was worried that history may repeat itself, and there was one man who was determined to make that happen. John Forbes Kerry was...
I like how he's setting that up. I like how he's setting up, like, okay, so here's daddy. He did the same thing here, and he just lost his re-election, and that's a very reasonable thing to think about, because it could be easy to look from the perspective of, oh, well, presidents during wartime, he should have not had to worry at all. He had this in the bag. But when you consider that, and the fact that 2000, he was this close, this close to not winning it in the first place. He probably shouldn't have won it, really. Yeah, you can understand why he might be a little nervous. Wee bit nervous. And the only thing he had really going for him, was that most presidents had been winning re-elections. That's still at that point,
Born in Colorado in 1943. His mother was a member of the wealthy Forbes family, so growing up, John was quite the fortunate son. Wink. Despite this, after attending Yale, he joined the Navy and went to Vietnam. I'm starting to see a pattern here. He served as an officer on River Patrol swift boats, a notably dangerous job, considering when it was all done, he got a bronze medal, a silver medal, and 3 Purple Hearts. And while this would make him a hero, after being nearly killed and injured 3 times, he realized that war actually really sucks. He became a leading voice in the anti-war movement, testifying before the Foreign Relations Committee on war crimes that veterans had confessed to. This would make him very popular to some and very unpopular to others. After a run as a lawyer, in '82 he was elected lieutenant governor.
Like, right? Like, imagine that. You know, you're fighting. And, I mean, that's respect, though. I mean, that was a hard transition for a lot of those folks. Like, you gotta imagine being a veteran like that and then becoming anti-war like that. Unless a lot of you as a group collectively do it, as an individual, that's hard to do. It's really hard to do.
Of Massachusetts,
like
and only 2 years later to the Senate. While there, he fought for veteran benefits, led probes on banking scandals, and would look into if there were any prisoners still in Vietnam. After decades in the Senate and failures in Iraq, Kerry decided to be the new Clinton and trim the Bush down to 1 term. But it wouldn't be easy. Unlike Bush, Kerry had to go through his party's primary. Even though major names like Gore, Clinton, Biden, and even Gray Davis refused to run, the former Vermont Governor Howard Dean was the clear frontrunner. He was the first to announce his candidacy, built the first grassroots online way of raising money, and his fiery opposition to Bush gained him early supporters. John Edwards, a young senator.
Oh, you want to talk about spirituality? I have to have my YouTube channel. I have the whole thing about it. I'm a universalist. I believe in all religions. They have truth to them. But anyways, back to this. Yeah, people don't. Yeah, that was Howard Dean. Literally, that was so ridiculous by today's standards. Like, he had like a shout, like an awkward shout. By today's standards, I would just be like, "Oh, that was awkward," and his people would just move about it and like not care. That literally just like his campaign was just like after that was just people just lost interest in the man. It was ridiculous. But yeah, John Edwards, yeah, that was.
From North Carolina was also a frontrunner. This may genuinely be the most boring set of names ever on a ballot. Gary's campaign was not off to a good start and seemed like it was going to collapse before the primaries even started. And yet, he pulled a major upset victory at the Iowa caucus. Dean ended up 3rd, but he wasn't demoralized. During his concession speech, he let out a mighty war cry to energize his supporters.
And then we're going to Washington, D.C.
They didn't watch this here beforehand.
This moment would become a massive joke, being played endlessly in the media. The Dean scream was a premature meme that, if seen from a modern Sheen, would have increased his lean in the political scene. Instead, Dean never recovered from the "I have a scream" speech, leaving Kerry to sweep up the nomination. He picked John Edwards to be his running mate, but only after John McCain, the Republican, turned him down. I guess we're not in the silliest timeline after all. At the Democrat National Convention, the keynote address was given by...
I forgot he had actually went up to John McCain and was like, "Hey, dude, let's do this." Yeah, imagine being a leftist during this time. Yeah, like that's why people, you have to understand, like, yeah, Democrats are definitely not a leftist organization. I mean, in terms of war tickets, yeah, that would have been a very powerful war ticket, and they would have definitely been able to have, but anyways, sorry.
Some random Illinois state senator, I guess? I don't know, it was probably a snooze fest. But the whole convention basically revolved around Kerry's military service. It was his biggest strength. Democrats were often seen as weak on... At the Democrat National Convention, the keynote address was given by some random Illinois state senator, I guess? I don't know, it was probably a snooze.
I forgot about that. I can't believe I forgot about that. That wasn't no 4. Yeah, Obama did. And that's why. Okay, I'm liking this guy, though. I like the way he's bringing stuff up. I like his vibe. I'm liking the way he commentates this. I mean, because, yes, and the sarcasm behind, like, oh, it's just some random guy. Obviously, it's perfect, because the foreshadow. Because, yeah, at the time, it was kind of like, oh, this random, who's this guy? I mean, he did it well. He made a good impression. I mean, if Obama had not done well to that speech, it would have been like, yeah, who the heck is this random dude? clearly this. I mean, you ever heard that speech? Go back and listen to that speech, and you're like, okay. Even if you don't agree with him policy, I'm just talking about in terms of a vibrato of a good politician. You're like, oh, okay, I get it. I get why people like Obama.
Newsfest. But the whole convention basically revolved around Kerry's military service. It was his biggest strength. Democrats were often seen as weak on national security. They hoped Kerry's military experience would prove that they could defend the country during wartime and handle Iraq far better. He promised to restore trust in the White House and never mislead the U.S. into war. He accused Bush of abusing the Constitution, selling out the middle class, and abandoning troops overseas. He believed in healthcare reform, abortion rights, and gay rights, just not to marriage. It's 2004 after all, let's not be crazy. He would leave the convention in July with a lead in the polls. What should have been a slam dunk election for W now looked like a repeat of 2000. The race was on. If there's one thing you need to know about this election, and the early 2000s as a whole, it's that people were terrified of terrorism. Anyone who grew up in this time knows exactly what I'm talking about. Along with Iraq, defense...
Yep. I grew up during this time. Yep, that was definitely a consistent fear. I still even have that occasional little bit like, oh, terrorist group. I mean, I don't think about it. Doesn't keep me up in that, but I still haven't even noticed. And I know in the back of my head, like that is, and it's not impossible for us to have. You know, I don't really travel outside of America that much these days, so probably less likely, far less likely. I mean, maybe like a cartel if I go to the Mexico at the wrong time or something, but like other than that, I'm probably pretty safe from that, you know. But like at the time, it's that was just put into the media constantly, like, oh, terrorism. So like, yeah, no, he's right. That was definitely the big fear, and now we just have a million different things to fear about today. So it's like terrorism is just like a drop in the bucket. That's like another Tuesday, you know. It's just whatever.
And foreign policy were the biggest issues of the campaign. Both candidates needed to prove that they were the ones who could protect the country and handle the wars. So what was old W doing this whole time? Well, to the annoyance of his party, not much. He was the incumbent with no competition, and he had 2 wars and a sputtering economy to deal with. So like a drama farming streamer, W was happy to let his opponent squabble while he raked in the donos. But soon, with slipping poll numbers, he had to start the fight. He was a very different man than the one who had ran in 2000. Daddy's silly little Texan was silly no more. He led America
at the time I was running, you know, I was campaigning for this. I was a kid. I didn't know better. I don't know. For me, it was like, I just thought the Republicans should just be more free market and being less nanny state type stuff. Because even back then, even before I knew what libertarianism was, that's essentially what I kind of always been, even without knowing what that was. Although I didn't really fully understand like what the logical conclusion of consequence of that all was, you know. I had to like think that through and be like, oh wait, X, what, you know, if A B, then therefore C, you know, type of deal. So, but at the time, yeah, I was just, you know, I had kind of got up with some of the local Republicans too. I had like, there's a state rep that I was really liked too, and I was more really campaigning for like the local Republicans than anything else. So.
Through its worst attack in decades and 2 wars. While he couldn't play the role of political outsider anymore, he thought his record would speak for itself. His policies had already taken shape. People knew what his whole deal was, so the only thing left was the thing that he was best at, making his opponent look stupid. He began going after Kerry before he was even the nominee. One of Kerry's biggest weaknesses that I conveniently forgot to mention was that he actually voted for the Iraq War, but then he voted against funding it. It seemed Kerry often changed his mind on policy, from war to taxes to trade. Bush framed him as a flip-flopper, someone who couldn't be trusted to be a steady leader like him. He argued that Democrats only criticized him, but never said what they would do better. Oh, well, if you're so smart, how would you have invaded Iraq? Kerry had the edge when it came to economic and domestic policy, so Bush had to try to make the campaign as much about homeland security as he could. The only crack in his armor was Kerry's military service. Kerry framed himself as the savior of the overstretched soldiers who were being led incompetently. He claimed that Bush had no plan to actually win the peace, and as a vet would be able to lead the wars far better. Bush knew he needed to change the narrative. If Republicans could strike at Kerry's military service, his biggest strength, they could severely undercut him. And lucky for W, he didn't even have to do it. Campaign ads can always be brutal, but this elections were so bad that they had to come up with a new word for it. Though each side had their feel-good, I approve this message slop, independent groups were free to get nasty. And one group in particular would really rock the boat. Literally. The Swift Boat Veterans for Truth were an anti-Kerry group of Vietnam vets who were mad at him over his testimonies back in the day. Their viral ads and best-selling book saw veterans accuse Kerry of being dishonorable and lying about his service to get his medals. Some were even Kerry.
I don't know if I remember these ads. Or if I don't, yeah, I don't remember seeing these. I mean, I'm not a veteran, so I wasn't a target demographic, you know.
Kerry's former commanders, they dredged up old American divisions over Vietnam, whether the war was right or wrong, whether Kerry betrayed his comrades by speaking out. It reinforced the thought that Democrats were weak on war and national security. It turned one of Kerry's strengths into a scandal, and his lead was erased. The term swift boating has now become synonymous with particularly grimy smearing of a candidate, something other veterans have been trying to wipe away for years. And that wasn't all. People worried that Kerry was too liberal, yet trying to tone down his views just led to more people calling him a flip-flop.
Oh man, just think about how conservative things were back then. They were worried about John Kerry being too liberal. I mean, the problem is, of course, we're back to that point now where that could be, that could be even brought up seriously. Which is, but to me, that's just hilarious. I mean, it's like, no, trust me, that man, I mean, the same man who's literally saying, like, hey, John McCain, be my VP. That's the guy you think is too liberal? The guy who would have been perfectly happy with having John McCain as his VP? I get it, vice presidents aren't the most powerful, influential people, but still. So, anyways.
It's safe to say the attacks on his character were working. Kerry's campaign struggled, and Bush pulled ahead, but he was having problems of his own. The Republican convention at the end of August laid out Bush's platform: decisive leadership, the No Child Left Behind Act, and national security. Bush explained his new ownership society, which, among other things, encouraged and gave benefits to people buying houses. I'm sure that won't backfire. Speakers like John McCain and the Terminator rallied the crowds, but not all the crowds were for them. Major protests were held right outside, with over 1,800 people being arrested and Bush's acceptance speech being interrupted by them twice. Though he came out of it with a lead in the polls, Bush wasn't safe from attacks on his service either. People suggested that he dodged Vietnam by joining the National Guard, that he received preferential treatment, or that he just sucked at being a pilot. In fact,
I mean, imagine that, like, by today's standards, that's like very mild. Because think about Trump, he dodged it all. He didn't even do any of that. So by today's standards, that would be like, man, at least you served. Even if it was like, yeah, of course I dodged, did a little draft. And it's not even draft dodging per se. Yeah, of course I just joined this service instead, so I didn't have to do this and stuff. I mean, my great grandfather did that for World War II. He joined the Army Air Corps before, the draft could be enacted. That way he could at least choose what he did. So, I get it, but by these standards, that's pretty mild. And also, thank you for the a follow past, Pastel Bilberg. Thank you for the follow. Much appreciated.
In fact, CBS News' 60 Minutes aired a segment with documents written by Bush's commander that verified these claims. But turns out they were forgeries, which basically ended the career of their best journalist and massively embarrassed them. The new widespread use of broadband internet made the online world faster and more accessible to the masses, allowing for some of the first viral videos to pop up. And the internet's key feature of never taking anything seriously ever was already...
Of course, well, mind you, because I'm pretty sure 2004. I don't think YouTube was even out yet. I'm pretty sure. Where is YouTube? created. Oh, God, if I can actually. Yeah, 2005. And this is so YouTube wasn't even out yet, mind you that. And I don't think, and I'm going to double check this. Facebook wasn't even out yet. Oh, okay. It was like right. Okay, Facebook was right becoming a thing. Facebook was barely a thing. But yeah. As we were. Yep.
Ready in full effect. Hell, they already ruined one campaign, but before the dreaded plague of the algorithm, videos had to be sent through email, meaning only the cream of the crop went viral, particularly ones from animation studio Jib Jab. Their 2 comedy videos for the election told every campaign joke imaginable. Bush was stupid, Kerry looked like Frankenstein, Bush was controlled by oil companies, Kerry was married to a ketchup baron, which I never mentioned. They became a nationwide hit, and some of the first viral videos. It skyrocketed the small animation studio to stardom, which they...
I mean, that was a pretty accurate video for the time and stuff. Like, gotta give them props. Like, in terms of oversimplification, comedy stuff, like, yeah, good job. You know, like
they have since turned into a terrible paste-your-face postcard service that your family would make you do. Yeah. Oh, how the mighty have fallen. Bush entered the debate still up 14 points on Kerry, whose campaign was starting to look like that one dog that's in everyone's life who looks like they're going to be put down any day now. You know the one. Bush was finally back in his natural habitat. Not to mention, the first debate would be all about foreign policy. But he was no longer Governor Bush, and John Kerry was not Al Gore. Bush didn't seem as sharp as he used to be, as seen through his Bushisms on the campaign trail.
Our enemies are innovative and resourceful, and so are we. They never stop thinking about new ways to harm our country and our people.
That's what I'm saying. Like, people, Bush isn't as dumb as people think they. Like, he isn't. I give him still to this day a benefit of doubt. I think he's more intelligent than people realize. Do I think he's a genius? No. I think he's at least above average, though, in intelligence, for sure.
And neither do we.
And the first debate would only prove it, as Kerry decisively beat him. Though the debate didn't have many gotcha moments, probably because the moderator immediately asked Kerry how he'd stop 9/11 too, people thought Kerry had a better understanding of the facts. He came across as more confident and likable than the president, a complete flip of the script from 2000. The aloof, out-of-touch persona Republicans had worked so hard to give him was now shattered. Bush did better in the second debate, but still not better than Kerry. And the third debate was all about domestic policy, where Kerry still had the edge. When it was all said and done, Kerry won every debate. He was now far more trusted on the economy and healthcare than Bush. He said that he could make America safer than Bush, that America had lost its international respect, that the economy and rising unemployment would lead to disaster. Bush was still seen as the man when it came to tough.
It's funny how those criticisms are still so true to this day, but the Republicans is so sad. They still, I mean, Democrats are admittedly like, y'all are just the lesser evil. I mean, so you don't have that much to me, but still, it is funny. Like,
but he spent most of the debates defending what he'd done, rather than talking about what he would do. It was his election to lose, and he was throwing it like Matt Ryan. Kerry was now the front runner, and heading into election week, it seemed the Bushes were doomed to be one-term presidents. But, wait, who is that? Oh my god, Osama bin Laden! Just 4 days before the election, news channel Al Jazeera released a video of Osama bin Laden, the first in nearly 3 years. He talked directly to the American people, telling them it didn't matter who they chose for president. US policies hadn't changed, so Al-Qaeda would attack them again. It was the first time he directly claimed responsibility for 9/11. He laid out his reasons and made fun of Bush's response. Both Bush and Kerry strongly condemned the message, promising that they would be the ones to bring justice to the terrorists. The Kerry campaign had tried for months to stop the campaign from just being about 9/11. Yet now, in the final days, that's exactly what it became. W now had the boost going into Election Day. On November 2nd, Americans around the country hit the now mostly electronic vote.
Yeah, I wonder how much Al-Qaeda knew to hit that interference. I wonder how much he thought or even cared that that interference was going to get Bush reelected again. I mean, I don't like I said. I don't think he actually really cared because he knew ultimately like that when the policies wouldn't change that much between the two. I think he knew better. He knew that.
Voting booths. Over 122 million people voted, nearly 17 million more than in 2000.
Smart.
The polls were close, and with each state called, the race got closer. Kerry won the Northeast, the West Coast, and most of the Great Lakes, while Bush won, well, you know, everything else. And yet again, for the second election in a row, it all came down to one battleground state. But not Florida. Oh no. The only state funnier than Florida. Ohio. Yet to everyone's relief, this time it wouldn't be decided by a few hundred votes, but by 100,000.
Right.
Bush managed to pull out a win in Ohio, securing the Electoral College 286 to 251, with one faithless elector in Minnesota voting for John Edwards. Oh, no, I'm sorry. They wrote in John Ewards. That is really funny. And while there would be a few lawsuits filed for discrimination, and the guy in charge of certifying Ohio's votes was Bush's campaign chair again, I don't know how you let that happen twice, Kerry conceded. In his concession speech, he emphasized the need for reuniting.
See, Democrats really, come on, man. If you're gonna try to care about democracy, you have to be a little bit like, hey, wait a minute, and you can't be so willing to concede just because, oh, we gotta move on as a nation. Like, if there's some squirrely stuff, you have to call it out. You have to call it out. I mean, it's just that simple. I mean, obviously, maybe the thing is because they probably maybe were doing squirrely stuff too. I don't know. Or this maybe it simply is that mindset of, oh, well, we just don't want this battle, we don't want to divide the nation, blah blah blah. But it's like, if one side is not playing by the rules, you gotta do something about that.
And healing in the country. It wouldn't be all bad for Kerry, though. He'd go on to be the Secretary of State under Obama and the Presidential Envoy for Climate under Biden. John Edwards would become a Democrat star and a frontrunner for the 2008 presidency. Of course, until it was revealed that he was covering up an affair and a secret child with a campaign staffer, all while his wife was dying of cancer, completely destroying his family and career. So not all winners in the end. Bush, on the other hand, surely breathed a heavy sigh of relief. He defeated Clinton and Gore, invaded Iraq, and won a second term. He'd finally truly avenged his father. And with that, he was free to begin his second term.
Okay, he got me.
Finally truly avenged his father. And with that, he was free to begin his second term. One that was far more peaceful and uneventful, and I'm just kidding, I'm going to be talking about this dude's presidency until the day I die, probably in the Middle East. Like and subscribe. Bye-bye.
Yeah, that was good. He's almost to 1,000 likes. Almost to 1,000 likes. Alright, yeah, definitely like this original. Go and like this original video. Make sure you're liking, this one. Yeah, that was good. That was good. I like this guy. I like this humor. Gets it. I'm getting that generation, so it's cool to have someone actually doing history content, because it is history. I mean, it's recent history, but it's history. And it definitely makes you, and I think it helps me even just think of myself and remind myself I'm a part of history too. Because I mean, this just happened, but it's still part of history. I'm still alive. I'm still going. I'm still doing stuff. So it's a good way of, I think, thinking about things. And yeah, so I'm going to call it good for the video. I hope you all have a good one. Appreciate y'all staying around. Peace.